My beloved child. Pause for a moment before you continue with the noise of your day. There are stories that seem to find people at precisely the moment they are ready to hear them. Perhaps this is one of those stories. Imagine, just for a little while, that you are standing at the edge of an unseen horizon where every unanswered question about love, timing, and hope is woven into a much larger tapestry than anyone can see. This is not a prophecy. It is a fictional tale about two hearts, difficult choices, and the quiet courage that changes everything. You have probably wondered why some connections feel impossible to forget. People come and go. Seasons change. Entire chapters of life close without warning. Yet one person can leave behind a silence that echoes long after their footsteps have disappeared. It is a mystery countless hearts have carried. Why does one soul linger while 1,000 ordinary encounters fade away? Perhaps the answer has never been as simple as distance. Perhaps there are choices unfolding beyond what either person understands. Imagine a quiet evening. The sky has already surrendered its last light. A single lamp glows in a room where someone sits alone. Their phone rests on the table only inches away. Your name is not on the screen. Not because it has been forgotten. Because seeing it would force a decision they are no longer certain they can avoid. They close their eyes. The room grows still. Memories arrive without permission. Not dramatic memories. Small ones. A smile they never expected to remember. A conversation that lasted only minutes but somehow became unforgettable. The kindness you offered when you thought no one noticed. The way hope briefly entered their life before fear quietly followed behind it. Those moments return like distant stars appearing one by one in the night. They realize something they have spent months trying not to admit. Their future cannot move forward forever without first facing what they left unfinished. But that realization brings another question. What if returning changes everything? The human heart often imagines that love is only about emotion. Our story suggests something different. Love also demands decisions. Real ones. The kind that ask people to leave behind old versions of themselves. The kind that require honesty when pretending would be easier. The kind that force someone to choose between comfort and transformation. This fictional story begins on the evening when that choice can no longer be postponed. Yet nothing about the decision is simple. Because another life is involved. Not only theirs. Yours. Imagine standing before two roads disappearing into thick morning fog. One road is familiar. Predictable. Safe. The other cannot reveal where it leads. Every meaningful decision resembles those roads. The familiar path protects us from surprise. The unknown path invites us to become someone new. Most people believe courage means feeling fearless. Rarely does it. More often courage walks beside trembling hands. It speaks through uncertain voices. It keeps moving even while asking difficult questions. Far away from where you are, they have begun asking those questions. Can I become the person I once promised myself I would be? Can I finally stop letting fear make decisions for me? Can I tell the truth even if I cannot predict what happens next? Each question feels heavier than the last. Because the answer will reshape more than tomorrow. It may redefine everything they believe about love. There are invisible rooms inside every heart. Some contain laughter. Some hold old dreams. Others remain locked for years because opening them means facing pain that was never fully healed. Our story invites you to imagine that your soulmate has spent far too long living inside one of those locked rooms. Not willingly. Simply because they believed the door could never be opened without everything falling apart. Long before your paths crossed, disappointments had already written stories inside them. Stories whispering that vulnerability leads only to loss. Stories insisting that people always leave. Stories convincing them that silence is safer than honesty. Those stories became walls. Brick by brick. Year after year. Until even they forgot those walls were built by fear rather than truth. Then you entered the story. Without realizing it, your presence became a mirror. Not because you were perfect. Because genuine kindness often reflects the wounds people spend years hiding. Some run from mirrors. Not because they dislike the reflection. Because they are afraid of finally seeing it clearly. That is exactly where this story begins to deepen. For months they convinced themselves that staying silent was protecting everyone involved. If they remained distant, no one would be disappointed. If they avoided difficult conversations, no one would be hurt. If they ignored what their heart continued whispering, eventually the feeling would disappear. But feelings ignored are rarely feelings erased. They become echoes. And echoes have remarkable patience. They return unexpectedly. During ordinary mornings. During long drives. While hearing a familiar song. While watching strangers laugh together. The smallest details become reminders that unfinished stories seldom remain quiet forever. Meanwhile, your own life continued moving. You smiled more than people realized. You carried disappointments with quiet grace. You learned to celebrate small victories while wondering whether certain questions would ever receive answers. Sometimes you almost convinced yourself the chapter had ended. Then an unexpected memory would return. Not loudly. Gently. Like sunlight touching an old photograph. You never chased the memory. Yet it refused to disappear completely. This fictional tale suggests that something similar was happening in another heart at the very same time. Neither of you knew. Neither of you could have known. Yet both journeys continued unfolding beneath the surface. There is a moment in every meaningful story when life asks a question that cannot be ignored forever. Not, what do you want? But, what are you willing to risk for what truly matters? That question has now found them. It arrived quietly. Without warning. Through an opportunity that seemed completely unrelated. A conversation with someone they trusted. A family gathering where unexpected words lingered longer than expected. A chance encounter that awakened memories carefully buried beneath routine. No single event caused the change. Many small moments gathered until silence could no longer carry their weight. Then came the difficult realization. The choice before them was not simply whether to reach out. The real choice was far more profound. If they opened the door to the future, they would also have to close the door on the version of themselves that had been ruled by fear. People often believe love asks them to find the right person. Sometimes love first asks them to become the right person. That transformation is rarely comfortable. Old habits resist it. Old excuses argue against it. Old fears insist nothing good can come from change. Yet somewhere inside them, another voice had begun speaking. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Simply enough to be heard. What if the life you hope for exists on the other side of the decision you are afraid to make? Those words remained with them. They could not explain why. They tried distracting themselves. Work became busier. Days became fuller. Conversations became longer. But quiet moments always returned to the same crossroads. One future demanded certainty before action. The other required faith before certainty. Every human heart eventually stands at that crossroads. Some spend years there. Some turn back. Some discover that the smallest step forward changes everything. Tonight, in this fictional story, they are still standing there. The wind is beginning to shift. Old fears are losing their authority. Yet one final obstacle remains. It is not another person. It is not distance. It is not time. It is a truth they have refused to admit, even to themselves. A truth connected to a promise they made long ago. A promise born from heartbreak. A promise that once protected them, but now may be preventing the very future they secretly long for. When that hidden promise finally comes into the light, every moment of hesitation will suddenly make sense. And when they realize what they must choose between, nothing about your shared story will ever look the same again. My beloved child. The longest battles are rarely fought where anyone can see them. They unfold behind quiet smiles. Inside conversations that never leave a person's mind. Within promises made years ago that continue shaping every decision long after the moment that created them has faded into memory. Our story returns to the quiet room where they still stand at the crossroads. Outside, the night appears ordinary. A soft breeze moves through the trees. Rain taps gently against the window. The world continues without realizing that, inside one human heart, an entire future hangs in the balance. The promise they made so long ago was never spoken aloud. No one witnessed it. No ceremony marked its beginning. It was born in the aftermath of disappointment. After trusting someone who walked away. After believing words that dissolved into silence. After giving pieces of themselves to people who never understood their value. Without realizing it, they whispered something to their own heart. Never let anyone have the power to hurt you like this again. At first, that promise felt wise. It became armor. Every painful memory added another layer. Every betrayal strengthened it. Every goodbye convinced them they had chosen the safest path. Years passed. The armor grew stronger. So strong, in fact, that it protected them from pain. But it also protected them from genuine closeness. Walls built to keep sorrow out often keep love out as well. Then your path crossed theirs. Not dramatically. Not like stories filled with impossible coincidences. Simply enough to awaken something they believed had disappeared forever. For a brief moment, life felt lighter. Hope became imaginable again. The future no longer seemed like something to survive. It became something worth dreaming about. That frightened them more than they expected. Because hope asks wounded hearts to believe tomorrow can be different from yesterday. Fear insists yesterday will always repeat itself. Those two voices cannot remain equally loud forever. Eventually, one must become stronger. For a long time, fear won. Every time they considered reaching out, another thought interrupted. What if history repeats itself? What if they have already moved on? What if I arrive too late? What if opening my heart only leads back to the same heartbreak? Questions became chains. Not because they contained truth. Because they contained uncertainty. Uncertainty has an extraordinary ability to convince people that doing nothing is safer than risking disappointment. Yet doing nothing has its own cost. Regret. Slowly, regret began speaking louder than fear. It arrived unexpectedly. While watching elderly couples walking hand in hand through a quiet park. While hearing someone talk about second chances. While listening to a song that reminded them of dreams they had abandoned before giving them a chance to breathe. Every reminder pointed toward the same realization. Running from vulnerability had never truly brought peace. It had only delayed healing. Meanwhile, your own life had continued unfolding. You were no longer the same person you had once been. Challenges had refined your character. Loss had deepened your compassion. Waiting had strengthened your patience in ways you never imagined possible. The story suggests something beautiful here. Growth was happening on both sides. Separately. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Like two trees growing in different valleys beneath the same sky. Neither tree can hear the other's roots stretching deeper into the earth. Yet both become stronger with every passing season. There came an evening unlike any before it. No extraordinary event announced itself. No voice echoed through the room. Only stillness. The kind of stillness that often arrives before someone makes the most important decision of their life. They picked up an old journal. Dust clung to its edges. Inside were pages filled with forgotten hopes. Plans. Dreams. Promises to become more courageous than yesterday. One sentence stopped them completely. It had been written years earlier. I don't want fear to become the author of my life. They stared at those words for a long time. Almost as if another version of themselves had reached across time to remind them who they had always wanted to become. Tears filled their eyes. Not because they were weak. Because truth has a quiet way of breaking through defenses that seemed impossible to move. For the first time, they admitted something they had hidden even from themselves. The difficult choice before them was never really about another person. It was about deciding whether they would continue living according to old wounds. Or according to new hope. That realization changed everything. The future suddenly looked different. Not easier. But clearer. Still, one final uncertainty remained. It wasn't whether they cared. It wasn't whether the connection had mattered. It was whether too much time had already passed. Whether silence had spoken louder than affection. Whether missed opportunities had permanently changed the story. These questions lingered as dawn approached. The first light crept across the horizon. Birds began welcoming a new morning. The world woke without knowing that somewhere, a heart had finally chosen honesty over fear. But choosing honesty and acting upon it are not always the same moment. Between those two moments lies one final test. A single unexpected encounter. A conversation they never planned to have. Words spoken by someone who knows nothing about you, yet unknowingly reveals a truth that shakes everything they believed. Those words will force them to confront the one question they have spent years avoiding. And when they answer it, the direction of both lives may change forever. But that moment has not yet arrived. My beloved child. Morning arrived with the kind of quiet that often goes unnoticed. Sunlight slipped gently through curtains. The world awakened to familiar routines. People hurried toward responsibilities, believing this day would be no different from countless others. Yet the most significant turning points rarely announce themselves. They arrive disguised as ordinary moments. They wait patiently for someone to recognize their importance. In another part of the city, they stepped outside carrying nothing more than a restless heart and thoughts they could no longer silence. The questions that had followed them for so long refused to stay hidden. They tried to focus on work. They answered conversations with polite smiles. They completed familiar tasks. But every quiet pause returned them to the same crossroads. It felt as though life itself had stopped asking them to ignore what they truly felt. Sometimes the greatest struggle is not deciding whether love exists. It is deciding whether we believe we are worthy of receiving it. That realization settled over them with unexpected clarity. For years, they had measured themselves by old failures. By mistakes they wished they could erase. By words spoken in anger. By opportunities they believed they had ruined forever. Every memory became another reason to stay silent. Yet silence had never brought healing. It had only postponed the possibility of it. Across town, your own story had also been changing. You had begun finding peace in places where you once searched only for answers. The quiet walk at sunset. The comfort of trusted friends. The strength that comes from discovering your identity is larger than any single chapter of your life. Without realizing it, you had become someone who no longer needed certainty to continue moving forward. That quiet confidence mattered more than you knew. Our fictional story suggests that hearts recognize change long before words ever describe it. There are transformations that cannot be photographed. No calendar records them. No audience applauds them. Yet they shape every future decision. Imagine a sculptor standing before a block of stone. Each strike of the chisel seems insignificant. One chip falls. Then another. Weeks pass with little visible progress. Then one day, what once looked like ordinary stone reveals the outline of something beautiful. Character grows the same way. Through countless small moments that seem unimportant until they are viewed together. As the afternoon unfolded, something unexpected happened. A conversation began with someone they had not seen in years. At first it seemed ordinary. Simple greetings. Questions about work. Laughter over memories that time had softened. Then the conversation turned toward regret. The other person smiled gently and said, "The hardest thing I ever learned was that fear doesn't protect the future. It only steals the present." The words landed with unusual weight. Not because they were dramatic. Because they were true. Truth often arrives in ordinary sentences. It does not need to raise its voice. It simply waits for the heart to become ready. For the rest of the day, those words echoed quietly. Fear doesn't protect the future. It only steals the present. They realized how many opportunities had been surrendered to hesitation. How many conversations had remained unfinished. How many moments had quietly slipped away while waiting for perfect certainty. Perfect certainty had never arrived. Perhaps it never would. Perhaps courage was never meant to begin after every doubt disappeared. Perhaps courage begins while doubt is still whispering. As evening approached, they found themselves standing beside a bridge overlooking calm water. The surface reflected the fading colors of the sky. Gold slowly became orange. Orange faded into deep blue. Watching the river, another thought emerged. Water never argues with the path behind it. It keeps flowing toward what lies ahead. Holding on to yesterday cannot change yesterday. But refusing tomorrow can change everything. They took a slow breath. For the first time in years, they stopped asking whether reaching out would guarantee happiness. Instead, they asked a different question. If I remain silent forever, will I always wonder what could have been? That question carried no easy answer. But it carried honesty. Sometimes honesty is the first step toward freedom. They reached into their pocket and unlocked their phone. Your name appeared after a long search through memories they had never truly erased. Their thumb hovered above the screen. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the last. Old fears gathered one final time. What if too much time has passed? What if forgiveness is impossible? What if hope belongs only to the past? Then another thought quietly answered. What if the greatest mistake would be allowing fear to write the final chapter? Their hands steadied. A single sentence began to appear on the screen. Not a perfect sentence. Not one rehearsed 100 times. Simply an honest beginning. Before they could press send, however, the phone suddenly rang. The unexpected call interrupted everything. The name on the screen belonged to someone from their past, someone connected to the very reason they had built walls around their hearts so many years ago. They hesitated. The message remained unfinished. The call continued ringing. Two choices now stood before them. Answer the past. Or finish reaching toward the future. The decision they make in the next few moments will uncover a truth neither of you has ever known. And when that hidden truth finally comes into the light, every silence, every delay, and every unanswered question from this fictional story will suddenly reveal a meaning that neither heart could have imagined.